My cell phone slipped right out of my hand, and it hit the floor with a thud. The screen was still glowing, showing the picture. It was my daughter Hope in a wedding gown, smiling next to a man I barely knew. "Hope, did you get married?" "Yeah, Mama. Yesterday." On the other end of the line, I could hear the sounds of the street cars, footsteps, voices, everything but excitement. "Why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I invited?" "It was just a small thing, Mama. Only family." That word hammered in my head. Family. I picked up the phone, stared at that frozen smile on the screen, and I understood. Maybe I had become an afterthought, a detail outside the frame. I deleted the picture, and in the silence that remained, a question formed that I still can't answer. What does a mother do when she stops being family? My name is Clara Mae Harrison, and for 67 years I believed family was everything. I raised my daughter Hope alone after my husband Elijah passed away. I worked cleaning houses for 2 different families, the Rodwells and the Millers, to pay for her college. I saved every single dollar so she could have the wedding of her dreams. I always imagined I'd be right there beside her at the altar, holding her hand, watching her realize the biggest dream of any woman. But last Tuesday, as I was having my morning coffee and checking my phone, I saw a picture on Facebook that changed everything. There was Hope in a white dress next to her husband, Devin Hayes. The only people with them were his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. My eyes scanned every detail of that image multiple times. Hope was radiant, smiling like I had never seen her smile before. And the caption read, "Our special day, family complete." Family complete without me. There was no invitation, no conversation, no explanation. I found out my daughter got married the same way any stranger finds news on the internet. My heart broke in a way I hadn't even felt when Elijah passed. Sitting there in my kitchen in Atlanta with the mug shaking in my hand, I realized that to Hope, I might no longer exist as a mother, but merely as an inconvenient memory of the past. I called her 3 times that day. They all went straight to voicemail. I sent messages pretending I hadn't seen anything, asking if everything was okay, if she needed anything. The response only came late that afternoon. "I'm fine, Mama. We'll talk later. We'll talk later." As if her own daughter's wedding was a minor issue that could be put off. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized I had spent my entire life being a mother to someone who no longer needed me. And in that silence of the early morning, a new Clara Mae began to wake up inside me. Over the next few days, memories came in like ocean waves. I remembered when Hope was 5 years old and got pneumonia. I worked all day cleaning the Rodwell family's home in Buckhead and sewed at night for the Miller family in Sandy Springs. For 15 days I barely slept 3 hours a night, taking care of her, driving her to the doctor, buying those expensive medicines. When she finally recovered, she hugged me and said, "Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to get married, and you're going to be the prettiest maid of honor in the world." Those words had lived in my heart for more than 20 years. I also remembered her sweet 16 party. I had been saving for 2 years to throw her a memorable celebration. I sold some jewelry from my marriage. I worked extra shifts on the weekends. I deprived myself of basic things. We rented the Magnolia Room in the Midtown neighborhood. I bought the most beautiful dress I could find. I hired a great DJ. I prepared all the soul food myself. That day, Hope told me I was the best mother in the world, that she would remember everything I had done for her forever. The guests commented that the love was visible in every detail of the party. I thought about the everyday sacrifices. The mornings I got up at 5 o'clock to make her breakfast before school. The afternoons I spent helping her with homework, even though I hadn't finished high school myself. The nights I stayed awake, waiting for her when she was out with friends, worrying about her safety. The Sundays I brought a pot of collard greens and ham hocks to Auntie Dolores's house, so Hope could spend time with her father's family. When she went to college to study business administration, I increased my work hours. I cleaned the Rodwell's house Monday through Friday, and on weekends I worked catering social events, serving tables. I wanted her to focus only on studying, not worrying about money. Every time my knees ached after so many hours on my feet or when my hands cracked from cleaning, I thought about the bright future Hope would have thanks to her education. During those college years she began to change subtly. She didn't come straight home after class anymore. She had study sessions, group projects, extracurricular activities. On weekends she went out with friends to places that were completely foreign to me. When I asked about her day, the answers got shorter, more distant. It was fine, Mama. I'll tell you later. But later never came. It was during her final year of college that she met Devin Hayes. The first time she mentioned him, I noticed a special light in her eyes. She talked about him constantly. How smart he was, how he came from a good family, how he had ambitious plans for the future. I was happy to see her happy, but I also felt a pang of something I couldn't identify. It was as if Devin represented a world I didn't belong to. A future where there wouldn't be space for a mother who cleaned other people's homes. The first time Devin came over for dinner, I cooked baked macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, candied yams, cornbread, and sweet tea. I put in more effort than ever. I wanted to make a good impression. Devin was polite and courteous, but I noticed his eyes scanning our small home with an expression I couldn't decipher. Hope seemed nervous, constantly explaining things as if she had to justify our way of living. Your house is very nice, Mrs. Harrison, Devin said when he left, but there was something in his tone that made me feel like he had said the opposite. That night, Hope told me I had been too intense, asking so many questions about his family, his job, and his plans. Mama, not everyone is like us, sharing their whole life in the first conversation. That was the first time I felt I was being viewed as a problem to solve. From then on, Devin's visits became less frequent. When he came, the conversations were more superficial, more formal. Hope started spending more time with him, coming home later and later. Sunday family gatherings became occasional, then sporadic until they disappeared completely. Devin and I have plans became the most common phrase in her vocabulary. When Hope graduated, I was so proud I cried through the entire ceremony. She had achieved what I never could, finishing a college degree. She was going to have opportunities one never had. After graduation, we went to celebrate at a nice restaurant in Decatur. Devin had also invited his parents, Franklin and Eleanor Hayes. It was the first time I met them formally. Franklin was a manager at a big company in Sandy Springs. Eleanor had been a teacher for many years before retiring. They talked about trips, fancy restaurants, and Broadway shows. I tried to participate in the conversation, but I felt like a fish out of water. When I mentioned that I worked cleaning houses, there was an awkward silence that Hope quickly filled by changing the subject. That night when we got home, Hope said something that hurt me deeply. Mama, I know you always try to be friendly, but sometimes you say things that can be misinterpreted. Devin's parents are very refined people. Refined? That word stuck in my mind. I wasn't refined. My love, my sacrifice, my dedication, they didn't count for anything compared to money and formal education. The following months were marked by increasing distance. Hope got a job at a big international company. Devin also had a good job. They started talking about getting their own place, renting an apartment together. I supported the idea, though my heart was breaking inside. Young people need their space, I said, faking enthusiasm. When they finally moved into an exclusive part of Atlanta, I was still welcome, but with schedules and conditions. Mama, you better call before you come over to see if we're around, Hope told me. The spontaneity of simply showing up to visit my daughter was gone forever. Now I had to make an appointment as if I were visiting a doctor or a dentist. The visits became more and more spaced out. First every week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. When I went, the conversation mainly revolved around their jobs, their plans, their friends. I listened with interest, but they rarely asked about my life. It was as if I only existed for them. As if my only identity was being Hope's mother. During the holiday season last year, I noticed Hope and Devin had started spending more time with the Hayes family. Well, Devin's parents have really beautiful traditions, Hope explained when I asked if they would come over for Christmas Eve dinner as we had always done. But next year we'll host, right? Next year never came. Or rather, it came without me. It was in February when Hope told me she and Devin were thinking about getting married. That's wonderful, baby. I exclaimed, feeling a mix of joy and anticipation. I immediately started making mental plans: the church, the dress, the flowers, the food. Have you set a date? How can I help? Mama, we want something simple, Hope said. But there was something evasive in her look. Nothing too elaborate. Weddings aren't as complicated as they used to be. I nodded, though I felt a small disappointment inside. I had dreamed for years of helping to plan my only daughter's wedding. The months passed, and conversations about the wedding became vague and sporadic. When I asked about specific details, Hope always had the same answer. We're still looking into it, Mama. I'll let you know as soon as we have something finalized. I started to feel like something wasn't right, but I didn't know what exactly. In May, I noticed Hope started posting more photos on Facebook. Pictures with Devin with the Hazes at fancy restaurants in places I didn't recognize. But when we saw each other in person, she told me very little about these events. It was as if she had two parallel lives, one she shared with me and one she lived in secret. It was early June when I started to suspect something was definitely going on. Hope canceled 3 dates in a row to see me, always with excuses about work or urgent commitments. When we finally met, she seemed distracted, nervous. I asked her directly if everything was okay with Devin, if there was a problem. Everything is perfect, Mama, she said, not looking me in the eye. It's just that we're so busy with work and other things. Other things. Those words resonated in my mind for days. What other things could be more important than including her mother in her life? The last time I spoke to Hope before discovering the truth was on a Sunday afternoon. I called to invite her to breakfast the following Tuesday. I can't, Mama, she said. I have a very important meeting that morning. That was odd because Tuesday mornings had always been our special time since she was little. It was the only day of the week I didn't work at the Rodwell's house. How about Wednesday then? I insisted. I don't know, Mama. Let me check my schedule and I'll call you back. But she never called me back. And I, as I always had, waited patiently for her call that never came. It was that Tuesday morning, exactly when I should have been having breakfast with my daughter, that I sat down in my kitchen with my coffee and a slice of pecan Danish. I logged onto Facebook to see photos of my neighbors and their grandkids, and I stumbled upon the image that would change my life forever. There was Hope, more beautiful than ever, in a simple but elegant wedding dress, smiling next to Devin in what was clearly a marriage ceremony. In the background were the happy faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes, dressed elegantly, posing as the only witnesses to that moment that should have been mine too. The photo description read, "Finally married. Thank you to our families for making this day perfect." Our families in plural, but I didn't appear anywhere. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't in the comments. I wasn't in that story that was supposed to include my entire life. I read every comment on that post. College friends congratulating, coworkers sending blessings, some distant relatives expressing surprise that they hadn't heard about the wedding. But no comment mentioned my absence. It was as if I had never existed in Hope's life, as if those 28 years of sacrifice and love had been completely erased from her personal story. I spent the rest of that day in a state of shock. I checked my phone over and over, hoping for a call, a text, an explanation. Nothing. Hope had gone on with her normal life, posting honeymoon photos, thanking people for congratulations, sharing moments of happiness from which I had been completely excluded. That night, lying awake and looking at the ceiling of my small bedroom, I understood something that hurt more than I imagined possible. My daughter hadn't forgotten to include me in her wedding. She had consciously excluded me. She had made a deliberate choice that I would not be part of the most important day of her life. And in that moment of painful clarity, I knew that my life, as I had known it until then, was over forever. But what Hope didn't know was that her mother, Clara May, had stored up much more than just pain during all those years of sacrifice. She had also stored a strength she herself didn't know she possessed, a dignity that had been dormant but never dead, and a capacity for decision that was about to change everything forever. The woman who got out of that bed on Wednesday morning was no longer the same woman who had patiently waited to be included in her daughter's life. She was a woman who had finally understood that some absences speak louder than any presence, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is respect for her own dignity. In that silent pre-dawn hour in Atlanta, as the bells of St. Jude's Episcopal Church rang at 3 a.m., Clara Mae Harrison made the first completely self-directed decision she had made in nearly 30 years. If she was no longer welcome in Hope's life, then Hope would no longer be welcome in hers. But this story was just beginning, and what came next would change the lives of everyone involved in ways none of them could have imagined. The following days passed in a dense fog that prevented me from clearly seeing where my life was headed. Hope didn't call to explain, didn't show up at the house, didn't show any sign of remorse. She continued posting honeymoon photos from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, as if nothing had happened, as if I were just another follower on her social media. Every new photo was a confirmation that I truly was no longer a part of her life. I tried to keep busy with household chores, with Wednesday Mass at St. Jude's, with talks with Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor. But no matter how much I tried to hide it, the pain was always there, causing a deep ache in my chest, like a constant presence that made it hard to breathe. It was while sorting through old papers in the wooden trunk that had belonged to my mother that the memories came rushing back in full force. I found birth certificates, immunization records that I'd kept so carefully, and school report cards where Hope always got straight A's. I remembered every sacrifice. The early mornings sewing dresses for ladies in the neighborhood to pay for Hope's English classes. The times I ate nothing but toast and jam so she could have meat on her plate. The birthday gifts I saved for all year to buy. I recalled the time she came home crying because her friends had designer clothes, and I would go to the Sweet Auburn Curb Market the next day to buy exactly what she wanted, even if it meant delaying the rent that month. Through all those years, Hope always had an excuse for not fully including me in her life. First, it was her studies, then work, then her boyfriend Devin, who didn't get along with mothers-in-law. I always accepted. I always understood. I always adapted to her schedule, her whims, her decisions. But now looking back, I realized that I had become smaller and smaller in her life, occupying increasingly minimal spaces until I reached the point of not even knowing she was getting married. The Hope I raised, the one I loved unconditionally, the one I always put first, had become a stranger who only shared crumbs of attention with me when it suited her. That Thursday afternoon, as I organized family photos into a shoebox, I found one that made me cry harder than I had cried in years. It was from Hope's confirmation ceremony. She was 8 years old. She wore a beautiful white dress that I had asked a local seamstress to make. In the photo, Hope was hugging me tightly and smiling with a pure, genuine happiness. I was smiling too. But now I could see in my eyes from that time something I had lost. The certainty that I was loved unconditionally by my daughter. I remembered that day perfectly. I had saved for 6 months for that celebration. I rented the Magnolia Room Hall. I invited the whole family. I prepared barbecue, potato salad, sweet tea, and a huge red velvet cake I specially ordered. Hope felt like a princess, running from table to table, introducing me to everyone as my mama, the most beautiful in the world. That night, when everyone had left, she helped me pick up the dishes and said, "Mama, when I grow up and have my own parties, you're always going to be the most important person. Always." Tears ran down my cheeks as I held that photograph. What happened to that little girl who promised me I would always be the most important person? When did I become so insignificant that I didn't even deserve to be present at her wedding? I continued looking through the photos and found another one that hurt just as much. Hope at 15, the day of her Sweet 16 party. We had rented a hall in the Midtown neighborhood. There was a DJ, food for 150 people, and a live band for the waltz. I had worked double shifts for a whole year to give her that party. I cleaned houses by day, babysat children at night, sold sweet potato pies at the farmer's market on weekends, all to see her happy, to give her the celebration she deserved. In that photo, Hope and I were dancing together, mother and daughter, during one of the songs. She had asked me to play a song she called our special song. "Mama, you used to sing this to me when I was little and sick, and it always made me feel better," she had told me. "I want us to dance to it together so everyone knows how much I love you." Those words echoed in my mind like sounds from another life. How had I gone from being the person who comforted her when she was sick to being someone she was ashamed of in front of her new family? I kept looking and found a letter Hope had written me when she was 18, just before starting college. She had written it on pink paper with careful handwriting, full of little drawn hearts in the margins. It read, "Dearest Mama, tomorrow I start a new stage in my life. But I want you to know that nothing I achieve will be possible without everything you have done for me. You are my hero, my role model, the bravest woman I know. When I grow up, I want to be a mother like you, loving, sacrificial, who always puts family first. I love you with all my heart, and you will always be the most important person in my life. Your loving daughter, Hope." I read that letter 3 times before I could believe what I was reading. This was the same person who had just excluded me from the most important day of her life. The same one who had promised me I would always be the most important person. I sat on my bed with the letter shaking in my hands and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I buried Elijah. I cried for the girl who wrote those words and for the woman she had become. I cried for all the dreams I had about being the mother of the bride. I cried for all the times I imagined helping her choose the dress, organizing the bridal shower, walking her down the aisle. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship I thought we had, which apparently only existed in my imagination. After the crying came the rage, a rage I had never felt in my 67 years. How dare she treat me like this after everything I had done for her? How could she be so cruel, so ungrateful? I had sacrificed my youth, my social life, my own dreams, all for her. I had worked until my bones ached so she could have opportunities one never had. And this was how she repaid me, with humiliation, exclusion, and oblivion. But after the rage came something worse, shame. I started asking myself if somehow it was my fault. Had I been too intense, too clingy, too unsophisticated for Hope's new refined life? I remembered the faces of Franklin and Eleanor Hayes when they met me, that subtle expression I hadn't been able to interpret then but that I now understood clearly. Pity mixed with discomfort. To them, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law who had to be tolerated, not accepted. I got up from the bed and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. There was Clara May Harrison, 67 years old, gray hair. Hands rough from so much work. Wrinkles around my eyes that spoke of years of worry. I wasn't elegant like Eleanor Hayes. I hadn't traveled the world. I didn't speak any other languages. I didn't know about fine wines or theater. I was a simple woman who had done the best she could with what she had. But did that make me less valuable? Did that justify my own daughter treating me like I didn't? Couldn't she just exist? I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning, wide awake as I replayed every sign I had missed. All those moments where I should have realized I was losing my daughter. The family dinners that had become few and far between, the phone calls that got shorter and shorter, the visits that required scheduling like a doctor's appointment. It had all been so gradual, so subtle, that I hadn't even noticed that I was being systematically excluded from Hope's life. On Friday morning, I felt like I was at the end of my rope. I knew I needed to talk to someone, vent a little, and maybe even ask for some advice. So I decided to call my sister, Auntie Rosa, who lives up in Birmingham, Alabama. Auntie Rosa had always been the most direct of my sisters, the one who wouldn't sugarcoat anything and would tell you exactly how she saw it. "She got married without telling you?" Auntie Rosa practically shouted when I told her what had happened. "That girl is out of her mind. How could a daughter do something like that to her own mother?" I proceeded to tell her the whole story, from the first little changes I noticed in Hope's attitude all the way through discovering the wedding announcement on Facebook. Auntie Rosa listened without interrupting, which was a pretty rare occurrence for her. "Clara May," she finally said in a serious voice, "I always told you that you gave that girl way too much. You've spoiled her rotten since she was little. You put her up on a pedestal, and now you're seeing the consequences." She wasn't wrong, and those words stung. Kids need boundaries. They need to understand that respect is something that's earned and maintained. I had always indulged Hope, always given in to her tantrums, and always put her needs before my own. But I did it all out of love, because I wanted her to have everything that I couldn't. So what am I supposed to do now? I asked her, and I could feel myself starting to sob. Now you're going to do what you should have done years ago. You're going to start living for yourself, Auntie Rosa replied, and her voice was firm. Hope has already made her decision about where you fit into her life. Now it's your turn to decide where she fits into yours. After I hung up with Auntie Rosa, I just sat there in the kitchen for hours, thinking about everything she had said. She was right. Hope had made it perfectly clear what role I played in her new life. None. It was time for me to make a decision about what role she was going to play in mine. On Saturday morning, I was drinking my coffee and eating a pecan Danish when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but when I answered it, I heard Hope's voice. "Mama, how are you?" she asked in a cheerful voice, like absolutely nothing had happened. "Guess what? We're back from our honeymoon. Cabo was amazing. Devin and I want to stop by this afternoon to tell you all about it." To tell me all about it? After 2 weeks of total silence after excluding me from her wedding, now she wanted to come over and tell me all about it, as if I was just some casual friend she was catching up with about her vacation. "What time are you planning to come?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Around 5 o'clock. We'll bring pictures and some gifts we bought for you." Gifts? Like some cheap souvenirs from Cabo San Lucas could make up for the greatest humiliation of my life. "All right," I said. "I'll be here." After I hung up, I stood there with the phone still in my hand, feeling a mix of emotions that I didn't even know how to process. Part of me was happy that I was finally going to see my daughter and be able to hug her and tell her how much I had missed her. But another part of me, and it was a part that grew stronger with every passing hour, was just furious at the coldness with which she had treated me, and at the casual way she seemed to assume that everything would just be fine after what she had done. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house, making a pitcher of sweet tea, and buying fresh pecan danishes from the local bakery. It was what I always did when Hope was coming to visit. I always made sure that everything was absolutely perfect to receive her. But this time, as I mopped the floor and dusted the furniture, I couldn't help but wonder why I was still trying so hard for someone who so obviously didn't value my efforts. Right at 5 o'clock on the dot, Hope and Devin arrived. Hope looked radiant, all tan from the beach sun and wearing brand new clothes. She looked completely happy. Devin wore that same courteous but distant smile that he always had when he came to my house. "Mama," Hope cried, and she hugged me like we were the best friends in the world. "I missed you. Look how tan I got." I hugged her back, inhaling her expensive perfume, which wasn't the same one she used to wear when she was living with me. Everything about her was different. Her clothes, her hairstyle, her way of speaking. It was like the Hope that I knew had been replaced by some new and improved version that just didn't include me. "Have a seat," I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. I served them sweet tea and offered them the fresh pecan danishes. "Oh, Mama, this looks so good," Hope said. But I noticed that she barely even touched the pastry. She probably didn't eat that kind of stuff anymore. Her new, sophisticated life probably didn't include treats from the neighborhood bakery. "All right, so tell me everything," I said, and I sat down across from them in my small living room. "How was the wedding?" Hope exchanged a quick glance with Devin before she answered. "It was very nice, Mama. Very simple, just like we wanted. Nothing too elaborate." "Oh, and where was it?" I asked, even though my heart was already sinking. "In a beautiful little chapel down in Cabo. Very intimate, very private. Just us and Devin's parents as witnesses. Just them and Devin's parents, as if I didn't even exist. As if 23 years of raising her didn't give me the right to be there." "And why didn't you tell me anything?" I finally asked, and I could hear my voice trembling. Hope sighed and put on the face that she used to make when she was a kid and she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Mama, it all happened so fast. You know how those bureaucratic things are. Suddenly the date came up, and we just decided not to complicate things. Besides, you know I've never really liked big parties." It was a lie. Hope had always loved big parties. Her sweet 16, her graduation. All the celebrations we had shared had been with tons of guests, tons of food, and tons of joy. But now, for her wedding, she had decided that she wanted some intimate little affair that didn't include me. "But Mama," Hope continued in a syrupy voice. "That's why we came today, to celebrate with you. Look at all the gifts we brought you." She pulled out a bag full of those typical souvenirs from Cabo. A ceramic ashtray, some seashells, a t-shirt that read "I love Cabo," and some coconut candies. Just a bunch of stuff that they had probably grabbed at the airport. Thinking, "Oh, we have to bring something back for Hope's mom." "Thank you, baby," I said. But it felt like each gift was just a slap in the face disguised as kindness. We spent the next 2 hours talking about the honeymoon, the places they had visited, the fancy restaurants where they had eaten, and all the activities they had done. It was like looking at vacation photos of complete strangers. I nodded, smiled, and asked all the appropriate questions. But inside, I felt like something was breaking for good. When they finally left, after making some vague promises to see each other soon and inviting me to come see their new apartment, I was left all alone in my living room, surrounded by those cheap souvenirs, feeling the weight of the silence that they had left behind. That night, as I put all the gifts in a drawer where I knew I would probably never see them again, I made a decision that would change everything. If Hope could live her life without including me in the important moments, then I could also learn to live my life without including her in the important moments of mine. And in that silence of the early morning, with my heart still aching, but with a new determination growing inside me, I started planning the first step of my new life. A life where I was the protagonist, not just the sacrificial mother waiting around for crumbs of attention. The Clara May who had waited her whole life for other people to decide her place in the world died that night. The one who would wake up the next day would be a completely different woman. A woman who had finally understood that respect is something you teach by example, and that sometimes the greatest love a mother can show is love for her own dignity. Sunday dawned with a clear sky, and it was a total contrast to the storm that I was carrying around inside. I got up earlier than usual, around 5 a.m., and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that heaviness in my chest that had been there ever since I had found out about the wedding. In its place was something different, a cold, clear clarity that I had never experienced before. It was as if, during the night, I had gone through some silent transformation, as if the Clara May who had waited her whole life for other people to define her place in the world had finally awakened from a very long sleep. I made my black coffee stronger than usual. I knew I needed my mind to be completely clear for what I was about to do. I sat down at the kitchen table where I had eaten breakfast for the last 15 years, where I had waited for so many phone calls from Hope that never came, where I had planned special meals for visits that were canceled at the last minute. But this morning, that table didn't represent waiting or disappointment. It represented the place where Clara May Harrison was going to make the most important decision of her life. I took out an old notebook where I used to write down Hope's doctor's appointments when she was little, important school dates, and her friends' birthdays. Now I was going to use those yellowed pages to plan something completely different. My definitive exit from a life where I was no longer welcome. On the first page I wrote, "Plan for Independence, Clara May Harrison, August 12, 2024. The date looked strange, written in my shaky handwriting, but the words felt more real than anything I had felt in years. The first thing I wrote was, "Assess resources." During all those years of sacrifice, I had managed to save up a considerable amount. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't exactly destitute either. I had the savings from a lifetime of work, a small but paid-off house in an area that had become pretty valuable, and something that Hope never knew about. A secret bank account where I had been depositing the extra money that I earned sewing dresses for neighborhood ladies on weekends for years. I had opened that account when Hope turned 18, thinking that it would be my wedding gift to her. Every dollar that I deposited there, I did so imagining the moment when I would give it to her. Asterisk my daughter, this is so you can start your marriage without any debt, so you can have your own home, so you don't have to go through all the difficulties that I did. Asterisk for 10 years. I had nourished that account with the illusion of seeing the happy look on Hope's face when she found out about the surprise. But now, after being excluded from her wedding, that money was going to take a completely different path. The second point on my list was research housing options. I knew I couldn't stay in this house, where every corner reminded me of the years of waiting, where every time the phone rang I would think that it might be Hope seeking reconciliation. I needed a new place, a space that was completely mine, where I could build a life that didn't depend on crumbs of attention from my daughter. I remembered that Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, my lifelong neighbor, had always told me about her sister Gloria, who had moved to a residential community for older adults up in Decatur. "It's wonderful, Claire," Mrs. Rodriguez had told me several times. "There are activities, security, and people our age. Gloria says that she's never felt so free in her life." At the time, I had thought that those places were just for people who didn't have any family to care for them. Now, I understood that they were for people who had decided to care for themselves. The third point was the most painful, but also the most necessary: gradually cut ties. I couldn't just disappear overnight because that would cause unnecessary drama and give Hope reasons to justify her behavior. My mom was always so dramatic. That's why we didn't include her in important things. No, my exit had to be as silent and dignified as my entry into Devon Hayes's life had been. Gradual, respectful, but definitive. After breakfast, I took a shower and put on my Sunday navy blue dress, the one that I wore to Mass at St. Jude's. But this morning I wasn't going to church. I was going to begin the most important investigation of my life. I grabbed my purse, put the notebook inside, and left my house with the determination that I hadn't felt in years. My first stop was the bank. It felt strange walking the streets of my neighborhood, knowing that every step I took was taking me further away from the life that I had known for 67 years. Mr. Fernando Lawson, the executive who had managed my accounts for the last 10 years, was surprised to see me near the ATM on a Sunday morning. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," he greeted me when he recognized me. "Is everything all right?" "Perfect, Mr. Lawson," I replied, and I even managed a smile which surprised me. "I'm just reviewing my financial options. I might need to make some moves this week." "Of course, ma'am. I'm available on Monday if you'd like to review your accounts in detail." "I appreciate that very much. I'll see you on Monday then." That little conversation gave me more energy than I had expected. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to me like a person who was capable of making important financial decisions, not just like some old lady who needed other people to manage her money. From there, I went straight to Decatur to the residential community that Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned. It was called The Legacy at Peachtree. And as soon as I got off the bus, I could see why my neighbor's sister liked it so much. It was a beautiful, clean place with well-kept gardens and an atmosphere of tranquility that I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist, a very kind woman named Patricia, welcomed me with a genuine smile when I explained that I was interested in taking a look at the facilities. "I'm so glad you came," she said enthusiastically. "We just happen to have 2 very nice apartments available. Would you like a full tour?" For the next 2 hours, Patricia showed me every corner of the Legacy at Peachtree. The apartments were small but comfortable, perfect for one person. They had a living/dining room, 1 bedroom, a full bathroom, and an equipped kitchenette. What I liked the most was the balcony that overlooked the gardens, where I could imagine myself drinking my coffee in the mornings and watching the sunset in the evenings. "We have lots of activities," Patricia explained as we walked through the common areas. "On Mondays we have a yoga class. Tuesdays are for knitting and crafts. Wednesdays are Mass in the internal chapel. Thursdays are ballroom dancing, and Fridays are movie nights. On weekends we organize excursions to different places: Savannah, Charleston, Asheville." Every activity that she mentioned sounded like something that I might enjoy, things that I had never done because I was always waiting around for Hope's schedule to clear up. "And are the people who live here happy?" I asked. "Look, Mrs. Harrison," Patricia told me honestly, "most of our residents come here after complicated family situations. Some have lost their partners. Others have children who live far away. Others simply decided that they wanted to live with more independence. At first, many of them arrive sad and nostalgic. But after a few months you see them and they seem like completely different people. Happier, more active, how should I put it? More alive." Her words resonated deeply with me. More alive. How long had it been since I had truly felt alive? How many years had I spent simply existing? just waiting for my daughter to include me in her life. What are the requirements to live here? I asked. Patricia explained the whole process. I had to be over 60 years old, check. Have a stable income to cover the monthly fee. I had savings for several years. And pass a basic medical evaluation to make sure that I could live independently. My health was excellent. The monthly cost included maintenance, security, activities, and basic utilities. It was a considerable amount but perfectly manageable with my savings. How long does the admission process take? I asked. If you bring all the documents this week, we could have everything ready in 2 weeks, Patricia replied. Are you interested in any of the apartments that you saw? I looked again toward the balcony of the apartment that I liked the most, the one that faced the garden, where I had seen several residents chatting animatedly under the shade of a big tree. In that moment I made a decision that surprised even me with how quick and clear it was. I'll take the one with the balcony facing the gardens, I said without any hesitation. Excellent decision, Patricia exclaimed. That's one of the most requested. Here's the list of documents that you need to bring and the contract for you to review carefully. I returned home that afternoon with a feeling that I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine hope. Not the hope that hope would change. Not the hope that things would go back to how they used to be. But the hope of a new life that depended solely on my own decisions. That night, instead of watching TV like I did every Sunday, I dedicated myself to organizing my documents. Birth certificate, proof of income, bank statements, and identification. It felt strange preparing paperwork to start a whole new life at 67, but every document that I organized made me feel more certain of my decision. On Monday morning, I went to the bank exactly at 9 a.m. when they opened. Mr. Fernando Lawson greeted me with the same professional courtesy as always. But when I explained that I needed to make some major moves in my accounts for a personal investment, I noticed a respect in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Mrs. Harrison, I'm delighted to hear that you're making proactive financial decisions, he said as he reviewed my bank statements. I see that you've been very disciplined with your savings all these years. You have very solid resources. Hearing those words filled me with a confidence that I didn't even know I had. For so many years, I had lived with the mindset that I was a person of limited resources, someone who depended on the charity of others. But the reality was that I had worked hard, saved diligently, and built a solid financial foundation without anyone's help. I need to make a significant transfer to my checking account, I explained. And I also want to know about safe investments that will give me a monthly income. For the next hour, Mr. Lawson explained the different investment options that could give me a regular income without touching the principal capital. It was information that I had never sought out before because I always thought that my money was meant exclusively for emergencies or for helping hope. Now I saw that I had options, that I could make my money work for me instead of just keeping it for others. From there, I went directly to the office of Mr. Michael Sanders, a lawyer that Mrs. Rodriguez had recommended to me years ago when I had had trouble with some house documents. I needed to make sure that all my assets were in order, and more importantly, I needed to update my will. Mrs. Harrison, what brings you here? Mr. Sanders asked when I entered his office. I need to update my will and better organize my assets, I told him directly. If he was surprised by the nature of my visit, he didn't show it. For the next 40 minutes, we reviewed all my property documents, bank accounts, and insurance policies. It was impressive to see it all together. I really had built a considerable estate through pure work and discipline. Do you have any specific changes in mind for the will? He asked. Yes, I replied without any hesitation. I want to leave 50% of my assets to charitable institutions that help working single mothers, and the other 50% to my daughter, but with one condition. What kind of condition? That she can only access the inheritance after writing a letter explaining why she made certain decisions about our relationship. She doesn't have to apologize. She just has to be honest about her reasons. That letter must be delivered to you as a witness, but she must write it, even if I'm no longer here to read it. Mr. Sanders wrote everything down carefully. That's a very thoughtful condition, Mrs. Harrison. It gives her an opportunity for reflection without forcing a reconciliation. Exactly, I confirmed. I'm not looking for revenge, Mr. Sanders. I'm looking for her to understand that actions have consequences, even the actions of children towards their parents. When I left the lawyer's office, I felt like a completely different person. I had taken total control of my financial situation, secured my future, and established clear boundaries for my relationship with Hope, even after my death. The following days passed in a flurry of activity that kept me busy and focused. I hired a moving service to assess my belongings. I decided to keep only the essentials: clothes, some small furniture, important photos, and objects with real sentimental value. Everything else would be donated or sold. The hardest part was deciding what to do with Hope's things that I still kept in her room. School trophies, books, and clothes that she had left when she moved out. I finally decided to carefully pack everything in labeled boxes and leave them in a storage unit that I rented near her apartment. If she ever wanted them, she could pick them up. If not, eventually someone would take them. During that week, Hope called me twice. The conversations were courteous but distant on both sides. She told me about her new job, her plans to decorate the apartment, and the dinners she had with the Hayeses. I listened politely, asked the appropriate questions, but I didn't share anything about my own plans. For the first time in years, I had important secrets that didn't include my daughter. "Is everything okay, Mama?" she asked on the second call. "You sound different." "Everything is perfect, baby," I replied with complete honesty. "I'm just organizing some things at the house. You know how it is. Do you need help with anything?" The question would have thrilled me before. Now it simply confirmed that Hope still saw me as someone who needed help, not as someone who was capable of solving her own problems. "No, thank you, baby. Everything is under control." On Friday of that week, I got the call from Patricia at the Legacy at Peachtree. My application had been approved, and I could move in the following Monday if I wanted. That night, alone in my house, surrounded by packed boxes and furniture covered with sheets, I didn't feel any sadness or nostalgia. I felt something that I hadn't experienced in decades: the excitement of starting something new. On Saturday morning, as I was having my last coffee at the kitchen table where I had planned so many special meals for Hope, my phone rang. It was her. "Mama, Devin and I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow, Sunday. We're going to try out the new dining room at the apartment." It was the invitation that I had been waiting for months. They finally wanted to include me in something, show me their new home and treat me like they were a part of their lives. But it was too late for that. "Oh baby, that's a shame," I said, trying to sound calm and collected. "I already have plans for tomorrow." "Plans with who?" she asked, sounding surprised. "With some new friends," I replied. "We're going on a little day trip to Lake Lanier." It wasn't a complete lie either. The residents of the Legacy at Peachtree had a trip scheduled for Sunday, and I had already signed myself up for it. "But Mama, we can change it to another day. It's important to us that you see our home," Hope pleaded. "Thank you, baby," I said gently. "But I'm already committed. Maybe another time when I have more time." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Hope wasn't used to me having plans that didn't involve waiting around for her. "Well, okay," she finally said. "We'll organize something later." "Sure, baby. Have a wonderful dinner," I responded. When I hung up the phone, I stayed seated in that familiar kitchen for what I knew would be the last time. A deep, satisfied smile spread across my face. For the first time in my life, Hope had had to adjust to my schedule instead of the other way around. It was a small change, sure, but it symbolized a much bigger transformation happening inside me. Clara Mae Harrison had finally stopped being a woman waiting to be included, and had become a woman who had her own life, her own plans, and her own happiness to look forward to. On Sunday night, after returning from a beautiful day trip to Lake Lanier, where I had met 3 lovely women who were soon to become my new neighbors, I packed up my last few personal belongings. The movers were scheduled to arrive early Monday morning, and by noon, I would be all settled in my new apartment. That last night in the house where I had raised Hope, I didn't cry or feel particularly nostalgic. Instead, I felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the woman I had been, and a genuine excitement for the woman I was becoming. I had made the bravest decision of my life, choosing my own happiness over waiting for the approval of others. Early Monday morning, as the movers loaded my few remaining boxes and pieces of furniture into the truck, I took one last look at every room in the house. In Hope's bedroom, now completely empty, I whispered a silent farewell. "Thank you," I murmured, "for teaching me that true love sometimes means knowing when it's time to walk away." The Clara May who walked out of that house that Monday morning was a completely new woman, reborn in a way. A woman who had finally learned that her dignity was non-negotiable, that respect is taught by example, and that it is never ever too late to start over, especially when you're making the right decision for yourself. As the moving truck drove away toward Decatur, toward my new life at the Legacy at Peachtree, I sat in the passenger seat, smiling toward the future. For the first time in 67 years, I didn't know exactly what awaited me around the corner, and that uncertainty felt like the most beautiful freedom in the world. My first week at the Legacy at Peachtree passed by like a beautiful dream that I didn't want to wake up from. Every morning I woke up in my new, cozy apartment, made my coffee in the little kitchenette that was all mine, and went out onto the balcony to look at the gardens, where I had already started to get to know my new neighbors. There was Mrs. Mercedes, who was 72 and had been an elementary school teacher for 40 years. Mrs. Delaner, who was 69 and had worked in a government office, and had fascinating stories from her youth, and Mr. Alexander, who was 75, a widower like me, who had been a carpenter and now made small pieces of furniture to give as gifts to his new friends. It felt strange, but in a good way, to be part of a group where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could do for others. At community meals, my new friends actually asked me about my life, my opinions, my plans. Nobody saw me as just somebody's mother or the awkward mother-in-law. I was simply Clara May, a woman with her own stories, her own dreams, and her own personality. On Wednesday of my first week, I participated in a knitting class led by Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, an elegant 74-year-old woman who had been a dressmaker in her younger days. While embroidering flowers on a napkin, I realized that I hadn't done anything purely for pleasure in years without thinking about whether Hope would like it or if it would be useful for the house. "You know what, Claire?" Mrs. Rodriguez said as she checked my work. "You have a real knack for this. You should come to every class." It was a simple compliment, but it really touched my heart. How long had it been since I had received recognition for something I had done well? In my previous life, my achievements were always measured by how much they helped Hope. Now, for the first time, someone valued my work for its own sake. Thursday was my first ballroom dancing class. Mr. Alexander Davis, a very distinguished 76-year-old man who had been a physical education teacher, led the classes with contagious patience and joy. At first, I was embarrassed because I hadn't danced in decades, but Mr. Davis reassured me. "Nobody judges here, Claire," he said with a kind smile. "We come here to have fun, and to remember that it's never too late to learn new things." During that class, I danced the cha-cha, the waltz, and even a little salsa. I laughed harder than I had laughed in years. My classmates applauded when I managed a difficult step, helped me when I got confused, and made me feel like I was part of a real family. A family that had chosen me and that I had chosen too. That night, as I ate dinner alone in my apartment, but without feeling lonely, my phone rang. It was Hope. "Mama, where are you?" she asked, her voice frantic. "I went to the house, and it's completely empty. The neighbors said you moved out. What is going on?" Her voice had a mix of confusion and panic that I hadn't heard since she was a little girl and got lost at the market. For a moment, my maternal instinct wanted to reassure her immediately, to explain everything, to assure her that I was fine. But the new Clara May, who had emerged in these last few weeks, kept her composure. "I'm doing very well, baby," I replied in a serene voice. "I moved to a place that's more suitable for my age." "More suitable? What does that even mean? Why didn't you tell me anything?" she demanded. "Because they were personal decisions that didn't require your approval," I said firmly, but without aggression. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Hope wasn't used to me making important decisions without consulting her. even though she had been making hers for years without consulting me. Where are you living now? In a place where I'm happy, baby. That's what matters, I replied. Mama, you're scaring me. This isn't normal for you. Are you mad at me about something? The question would have disarmed me before. I would have rushed to explain that I wasn't mad, that I loved her, that I just wanted us to be happy together. But now, I saw that question for what it really was. An attempt to return to the old dynamic, where I was responsible for managing her emotions. I'm not mad, Hope, I said. I'm living my life. What does that mean? She asked, her voice rising in frustration. It means I finally understood that I have the right to make my own decisions, to have my own plans, and to be happy without depending on the approval of others. I explained calmly. Another silence followed. I could almost picture Hope on the other end of the line, trying to process this version of her mother that she didn't know. Can you just tell me where you are? Devin and I are worried. Devin and I. It was always Devin and I, as if they were a single entity making joint decisions about my life. But there was something in Hope's tone that was different this time. For the first time in a long time, she seemed genuinely worried about me. Not just annoyed because I wasn't available when she needed me. I'm at the Legacy at Peachtree in Decatur, I finally told her. It's a very nice residential community for people my age. A retirement home? The words bothered me, but they didn't surprise me. To Hope, any place where older people lived was automatically a retirement home. No, baby, I corrected her. It's a place where I live independently, but with the company of people who are at the same stage of life as me. I have my own apartment, my own activities, and my own social life. Social life? There was genuine surprise in her voice, as if she had never considered that I could have a social life independent of her. Yes, Hope. I have new friends, activities I enjoy, and plans that don't include waiting for you to have time for me, I said. The words came out more direct than I had planned, but I didn't regret saying them. It was time for Hope to understand the consequences of her decisions. Mama, we have always had time for you, she protested. Did you really have time to include me in your wedding? The silence that followed was long and heavy. It was the first time I had directly mentioned the wedding exclusion, and we both knew it was the elephant in the room that had been present in all of our subsequent conversations. Mama, I already explained that it all happened so fast, that it was a very simple thing, she started, but I cut her off. Hope, I interrupted her with a firm but calm voice. I'm not interested in hearing any more excuses. What happened happened. I'm not looking for apologies or explanations. I just want you to understand that decisions have consequences. What kind of consequences? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The consequence that I finally understood that I'm not a priority in your life, and I've decided that you won't be a priority in mine either, I stated plainly. The words came out with a clarity that surprised me. There was no anger in my voice, no resentment, only a quiet honesty that made me feel freer than I had felt in years. Does that mean you don't want to be my mother anymore? The question hurt because I could hear the little girl behind the adult woman, but it also strengthened me because it reminded me that Hope knew exactly what she had lost. I will always be your mother, baby, I replied softly. But I will no longer be the mother who waits for crumbs of your attention. I will no longer be the mother who accepts any treatment just to be present in your life. If you want a relationship with me, it will have to be a relationship of mutual respect. And what would that look like? She asked. It was the first time Hope had specifically asked what I wanted from our relationship instead of simply assuming that I would adapt to whatever she offered. I don't know yet, I answered honestly, but I know it can't be like before. After hanging up that night, I sat on my balcony watching the lights of Decatur, feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. It had been the hardest conversation of my life, but also the most necessary. For the first time, I had set clear boundaries with my daughter. I had expressed my feelings without trying to protect hers. I had placed my dignity above my desire to keep the peace. The following days passed without any news from Hope, and for the first time, her silence didn't cause me anxiety. I was too busy discovering my new life to worry about interpreting her lack of communication. On Friday, I participated in the weekly excursion to downtown Atlanta, where we visited the Georgia State Capitol and ate at a traditional soul food restaurant near Centennial Olympic Park. On Saturday, I went to a yoga class for the first time in my life and discovered that my body was more flexible than I thought. On Sunday, after Mass at the chapel at the Legacy at Peachtree, I was returning to my apartment when Patricia, the receptionist, stopped me. "Mrs. Harrison, you have visitors," she said with a smile. "A young couple who say they're family." My heart sped up a little, but not with the anxiety of before. It was more curiosity to see what Hope and Devin wanted. I found them in the visitors' lounge, sitting together on one of the elegant sofas. Hope looked nervous, almost fragile, very different from the confident, successful woman she had been in our last encounters. Devin looked uncomfortable, as if he would rather be anywhere else. "Mama," Hope said, standing up when she saw me. "Thank you for seeing us." It felt strange that she thanked me for seeing them, as if she finally understood that she could no longer simply appear in my life uninvited. "Have a seat," I said, taking the chair across from them. "How are you?" "We're fine," Hope replied, though her voice suggested otherwise. "We wanted to come and see where you're living to make sure you're comfortable." I looked around the visitors' lounge with its elegant furniture, its well-kept plants, and its large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Then I looked back at them, this young couple who had come to make sure that I was comfortable, as if they had any right to approve of my life decisions. "As you can see, I'm very comfortable," I said with a genuine smile. "This place is perfect for me." "Yes, it looks very nice," Devin admitted, speaking for the first time. "It must be expensive though." There it was. The real concern, not my happiness or my comfort, but how much of their inheritance I was spending. "Fortunately, I can pay for it without any problems," I replied calmly. "It turns out I worked and saved more than you knew." I watched as Hope and Devin exchanged a quick glance. It was obvious they had talked about my financial situation before coming. "Mama, we don't want you to run out of money by living in a place like this," Hope said in a worried voice. "Why would I run out of money?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "Well, you always told us you had to watch every dollar." "That money didn't go very far," she said. It was true. For years I had told them that. But what I had never explained was that it didn't go far because I constantly prioritized their needs over my own, because I saved money for their emergencies instead of spending it on my own comfort. "It's true that I watched every dollar," I confirmed, "but it was because I was saving for you, to be able to help you when you needed it. Now that it's clear you don't need my help, I can use my money for my own happiness." "What do you mean we don't need your help?" Devin asked in a tense voice. "I mean you are successful, independent adults capable of making your own decisions without consulting me, including decisions as important as getting married. If you're independent enough for that, then you don't need me to save my money for your emergencies," I said. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. I could see them processing the logic of my words, realizing that they couldn't have it both ways. Total independence from me when it suited them and access to my resources when they needed them. "Mama," Hope said finally, her voice softer, "are you very angry with me?" It was the question of a child, not an adult. And for the first time since the wedding, I felt a little compassion for her. But it was a different kind of compassion. Not the blind compassion that had led me to excuse her behavior for years. "I'm not angry, baby," I told her honestly. "I'm disappointed. I'm sad. But above all, I am at peace." "At peace?" Hope repeated, confused. "At peace with finally understanding who I am beyond just being your mother," I elaborated. "At peace with having discovered that I can be happy without depending on your approval or your attention." Hope remained silent for a moment, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "Does that mean you don't love me anymore?" It was the question I had been waiting for, and I had the answer ready. "I love you more than you can imagine, Hope," I said gently. "But I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to disrespect you. I've learned that true love includes boundaries, includes dignity, includes mutual respect. And what can we do to fix this? Devin asked, speaking for the first time as if he truly cared about the answer. I looked at both of them, this young couple who had come to fix the situation, probably hoping that with a visit and a few apologies, everything would return to normal. There's nothing to fix, I said calmly. I'm not broken. I'm not sick. I'm not acting out of spite. I am simply living the life I deserve to live. But can we still be family? Hope asked, her voice trembling slightly. We will always be family, I assured her. But it will be a different kind of family, one where we respect each other, where we include each other in the important things, where we treat each other as equal adults. How do we know what you expect from us? Devin asked. It was a practical question, and I appreciated his honesty. Hope knows how to treat me with respect, I replied, looking directly at my daughter. She did it for many years when she was younger. She just needs to remember how to do it. Hope nodded slowly, as if finally understanding that there was no quick fix, that she would have to do real work to rebuild our relationship. Can we call you sometimes? She asked in a small voice. Of course, I said. But I won't be available every time you call. I have my own life now, my own activities, my own commitments. It felt strange saying those words. For 67 years I had never had commitments that I couldn't cancel for Hope. Now I had knitting classes, excursions, dinners with friends, and a social life that was important to me. When they left that afternoon, after vague promises to maintain better communication and do things differently, I stayed seated in the visitors' lounge for a while longer, processing what had happened. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tears of remorse, no promises of immediate change. But there had been something more valuable, recognition. For the first time, Hope had recognized that she had treated me poorly, that she had made decisions that had hurt me, and that she would have to make a real effort if she wanted to have a relationship with me going forward. That night, during the community dinner in the dining hall at the Legacy at Peachtree, my new friends asked me about my visitors. Everything okay with the family? Mrs. Mercedes asked with genuine concern. Everything is exactly as it should be, I replied with a smile. For the first time in years, everything is exactly as it should be. And it was true. I didn't know if Hope and I would ever have a close relationship again. I didn't know if she would truly change or if she would simply learn how to manage me better. But I knew that I had changed forever, and that no matter what happened to our relationship, I would be fine. The Claire who had waited for years for her daughter to include her in her life had died forever. In her place, a woman had been born who knew her worth, who had her own dreams, and who was capable of being happy with or without the approval of others. And that transformation, painful as it had been, was worth more than any reconciliation that required me to return to being the small, subservient woman I had been before. For the first time in my life I was free. And that freedom felt like the most beautiful gift I had ever given myself. Today, 6 months later, I wake up every morning in my small but cozy apartment. I look out the window and see a different world. It's not a world without pain, but it's a world where I choose who is part of my story. I tend to my plants on the patio. I read the books I always wanted to read. I frequent the new chapel where nobody knows me as Hope's mother. I am simply Clara May Harrison, a 67-year-old woman who is learning to live for herself after decades of living exclusively for others. Sometimes I get calls from unknown numbers that I know are Hope, trying to reach me through other people's phones. I hear her voice on the answering machine. Always crying, always apologizing, always promising she will change. But some exclusions cause pain too deep to be healed just with words. Some rejections are too final to be forgiven with simple remorse. Hope had the opportunity to include me in the most important moment of her life, and she chose to leave me out. Now I choose to leave her out of my new life. During these months, I've learned that the loneliness I feared doesn't exist when you live in peace with yourself. My days are filled with activities that nourish my soul: knitting classes with Mrs. Rodriguez, Thursday dances with Mr. Davis, and weekend excursions where I discover parts of Georgia and the South that I had never visited before. At community dinners, my friends listen to me attentively when I tell stories of my youth, when I share recipes I learned from my mother, when I give my opinion on the daytime soaps we watch together in the afternoons. Yesterday at the grocery store, a lady recognized me and told me that Hope was offering a reward for anyone who knew my whereabouts. I smiled politely and replied that sometimes people find each other when they are ready to find each other. I don't feel rage. I don't feel vengeance. I don't feel hatred. I only feel the peace of someone who made the right decision at the right time. Hope learned in the most painful way possible that mothers also have feelings, that love has boundaries, and that some doors once closed never open again. Last week, I received a very formal letter delivered by a lawyer. It was from Hope, typed with no tears to smudge the ink, no shaky handwriting of emotion. In that letter, my daughter explained, with a coldness that surprised me, her reasons for excluding me from the wedding. She said it had been a practical decision, that the Hayes had insisted on a small ceremony, that they hadn't wanted to hurt my feelings, but they also hadn't wanted to create any conflicts with her new in-laws. I read that letter 3 times before fully understanding what I was reading. Hope had reduced the most painful moment of my life to a practical decision. She had turned my exclusion into a matter of family diplomacy. There was no recognition of the harm she had caused me. There was no understanding of the sacrifices it had been for me to raise her alone. There was no gratitude for the years of unconditional love I had given her. That letter confirmed something I already knew in my heart. The Hope I had raised, the girl who had promised me that I would always be the most important person in her life, had disappeared forever. In her place was a woman who viewed our relationship as a social obligation that could be managed with efficiency, not as a sacred bond that deserved care and respect. I put the letter away in a wooden box along with some old photographs that had resisted time. Not out of spite, but because some words only need to be read, not answered. A mother's love doesn't end. It simply transforms. My love for Hope changed into something different. Respect for my own dignity, care for my own happiness, protection for my own peace of mind. This morning, as I water the plants on my patio and watch the sunrise over Dakar, I find myself thinking about all the women who, just like me, have spent their lives waiting to be valued by other people. I think about the mothers who sacrifice their own dreams for their children, only to have those children later view them as awkward burdens. I think about the grandmothers who babysit their grandchildren, only to be told that they're interfering too much. I'm thinking about all of us who were taught that our worth was dependent on how much we could give to others, never on how much we deserve to receive in return. To all those women, I would say what I've come to know now. It's never too late to choose your own happiness. It's never too late to establish boundaries. It's never too late to decide that you deserve respect, that you deserve consideration, that you deserve to be treated as the valuable person you have always been. The freedom I feel now didn't come from punishing Hope, but from liberating myself from unrealistic expectations. It wasn't born of revenge, but from a place of self-respect. It wasn't born of hatred, but from the self-love that had been dormant within me for far too many years. Last night, after our community dinner, Mrs. Mercedes asked me if I ever regretted making this decision. "Don't you miss your daughter?" she asked, with the genuine kindness of someone truly concerned about my well-being. "I missed the daughter I thought I had," I replied honestly. "But I don't miss the relationship we actually had, because that relationship was slowly killing me from the inside out." That statement is the purest truth I have ever spoken. For years, I lived in a fantasy where I believed Hope loved me the same way I loved her. The reality is that to Hope, I was a convenience when she needed something and a nuisance when she didn't. Accepting that harsh reality was incredibly painful, but it was also liberating in a way I never expected. Today, I write these words from my patio, with the soothing sound of the community garden fountain in the background, with the sweet scent of the begonia I planted just last week, and with the unwavering certainty that I chose the right path for myself. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I know it will be a future where my happiness won't depend on the decisions or actions of other people. Sometimes the greatest acknowledgement is the deliberate silence one chooses to maintain. And in that very silence, Clara May Harrison finally found her voice, her inner strength and her long-sought peace. Did you like the story? And what city are you listening from? Let's connect in the comments section. If you enjoyed the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, which will help me continue bringing more stories like this to you. Thank you so much for your kind support. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments about the story. On the screen right now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more available on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.